Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions from international educators we've been hearing over the last 7 days. And we'll get into those in just a couple of minutes, but before we do, we want to say thank you to all of you who have been commenting on the newsletter and on the roundup over the last few weeks. I know we've been covering some very meaty topics, the ones that leave a lot of us bewildered each day with the kind of news we're hearing about what's coming next and what the government is proposing for international education, amongst many other things that are the target of its ire. But we do want to share with you a milestone, obviously, that we've reached recently with our newsletter. And for those that are new to the Roundup, we take our questions we do each week from our weekly newsletter that comes out on Monday. And that newsletter covers all sorts of topics from social media and international ed news related to anything from upcoming webinars, how social media is being used by institutions in international education, how the U.S. is responding to AI at the university level and using that as tools in the admissions process, on campus, all of those implications. We also talk about what's the news of the day, what kind of our hot takes on some of the news stories that are impacting what we do in international education, and there's been a lot of those as of late. But we also have a solutions central section that talks through some of the thinkers in the industry, some of the practical steps institutions are taking to enhance what they're doing internationally with proposals that they have, or new ventures that they're taking, new ways, new models that they're using to get the word out about their institutions and to international audiences. We have a global roundup section as well that takes a look at what's happening in other countries, because in international education, in the U.S., we really need to pay attention to those things that are happening around the world, because they impact what we do here. In what happens for example, what happens in Canada or Australia, their recent elections are going to impact what those countries are able to do related to international education. Some things that will surprise a lot of you, for those that aren't following those other countries, to see that elections in Canada and Australia, even though they retained the ruling party in power in recent elections over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, the resulting decisions that might impact international education aren't going to be that much better than they have been, which haven't been good the last 2 years for Australia and for Canada. But we share those in the newsletter on Mondays, and we touch on some common themes that we see developing in those news stories. We kind of coalesce those around topics like we have today, and go next level, go into some of the depths of the conversation, into some of the nuance that we might not be normally available from the headlines. And we talk about those in ways that hopefully are practical steps and things that we can be considering on our institutional campuses. And oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges we have, particularly with the barrage of news stories that come at us each week, is how do we manage up? And this is a particularly important topic in these fractious times, when the pendulum can swing very rapidly from bad news one week to good news the next, and back the other way very quickly. And we'll touch on some of those things today. But I wanted to draw your attention to links in the chat, one of which is to our SMIE Consulting website, where you can subscribe to that email version of the newsletter. Fill in your details on the smieconsulting.org/subscribe page, and you'll get that delivered to your email inbox 9 a.m. Monday mornings. If you prefer to get your international ed news via LinkedIn, we have a LinkedIn version of the same newsletter, comes out about a half an hour earlier. And between those 2 editions, we're so happy to report we have over 2,500 subscribers now in the international ed community that are getting this news in their inboxes or on their LinkedIn feeds every Monday. And that's important for me. Being in the industry for 32 years, I've been on the committees, I've done the service work, I've volunteered my time with the professional organizations, and I've found over the recent years that I needed to be giving back more than just that time. And part of that is the labor of love I do through my consulting business, SMIE Consulting. I do these two things, the newsletter and then the weekly roundup here, Midweek Roundup, to help be my service to my field, my professional development for colleagues who are new to the field, who frankly don't have time to look up from their desk to go through thousands of news stories and kind of need a condensed version of what the top topics of the day are. And then if they need the more in-depth looks at those topics and questions that they might have, and or be hearing on their campuses how they're responding to them, and getting some perspective on what's going on in the rest of the world, then I'm happy to provide that to my colleagues in the field. But the newsletter versions and the email and the LinkedIn version certainly can help you digest all the barrage of news stories that we're seeing of late that impact our day-to-day lives in international education. So let's get right to our first topic of the day, and that is, are domestic cliffs happening elsewhere too? And behind all the nonsense we've been hearing from this administration in recent months about things international or things overseas, non-U.S. citizens that are seemingly under fire across the country and under threat by this government who has very real problems with anyone who is in this country that isn't an American citizen. Though they'll claim that it's only those that are not legally here and that are committing crimes and all of these other things. We know in international education that we have a target on our backs. Our students have targets on their backs. Our institutions in general have targets on their backs from this administration. Everything from accreditation to tax exempt status to ability to enroll international students to research funding. Everything's on the table as far as this administration is concerned with reforming, or in their words, reforming the higher education system in our country. And certainly the higher ed system in the U.S. is not perfect. It's very decentralized. It's very disjointed. And the U.S. Department of Education has also been a target of the administration's ire with its downsizing and budget cuts and all of these things. We're in the middle of weathering the storm of the funding cuts that the budget proposal to Congress from the administration related to ECA, basically devastating that branch and making it bare bones, cutting 85-90% or more of their funding. That's the budget proposal they sent to the Hill. Whether that actually gets fulfilled or acted on by Congress, no one, it's not going to be passed carte blanche, because that first Trump administration tried the same thing to consistently cut ECA, cut the State Department budget, and those attempts were all rebuffed in the first Trump administration by advocacy efforts and actions on the Hill by bipartisan folks in support of international education. We're hoping the same thing happens again, and we can't let up on our advocacy efforts. We worked with getting these cases that heard of our students that had their SEVIS records terminated, and those that were brave enough to file suit. In the 65 cases or so, some of them multiple students in a sort of class action suit, filing suit, the government had to back down because they didn't have any evidence to support their goal. Now they're coming back with a new policy. We'll talk about that in a bit too. That might still impact us in our field, next level stuff. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But related to what's the backdrop of all this related to higher education, that in international education we need to be aware of. And that it is happening not just in the United States, it's happening elsewhere. And that is the concept of a domestic cliff that we're about to go over. Fall of 25 is supposed to be the last decent graduating class of high school students in the United States that will be populating U.S. colleges around the country. The thought is, and the numbers seem to project it, that the birth rates post 2008 declined substantially for 3 or 4 years, and there will be not an uptick again until into the 2030s, levels that we're seeing in the last couple of years. So this domestic cliff in the United States is causing institutions of higher education, particularly in the Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, that have seen declining populations anyway over the last couple decades. And on top of that, declining birth rates for that declining population, fewer high school graduates in those regions of the country that will be going on, particularly to state schools or prime ground for recruitment for many universities. So the domestic cliff is happening here. Many institutions, including my own, are being forced to look at other sources of students. And we are looking at international students quite significantly as part of our path back to growth. And we're staving off further cuts to our institution. So this is a reality that many state institutions in the Northeast, Midwest, and Mid-Atlantic states are facing. Midwest, certainly a very broad area of the country, seeing a lot of institutions seeing these declines, seeing their initial or current sources of students kind of drying up or significantly reducing, seeing increased competition for those same students. So there's a need to look elsewhere, and we're looking at international as a real important tool to help us overcome some of those budget shortfalls we're going to be seeing as the current domestic age population declines. So the article that I've shared is an ICF Monitor article from last week that talks. It's actually a podcast link to their podcast that they've just had. They have a very good podcast as well on topical issues like this. And one of those is the domestic enrollment cliff, a global phenomenon. And what they make clear, and we've kind of seen, we've alluded to this issue of declining domestic populations as we've talked about some of the other countries around the world that are particularly in East Asia that have, and even now in Europe, that are aligning their international education policies in terms of visa entrance and work permissions post-study to make it easier for international students to come in, get educated, become the skilled workers that country needs, and then offering them work permission and pathways to residency and citizenship very easily, and making that process much smoother and removing obstacles and making a student status dual intent so that they can stay and be workers and then eventually residents and maybe even citizens someday. All of that to say is that those countries have something we will never have. They have aligned their economic interests where they know that they have skills shortages in certain fields. They've aligned those economic needs with a need for more skilled workers in particular fields with their international ed policy. And they're more forward-thinking too. Many of these countries in East Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, are looking 5-10 years down the road and seeing these problems coming and taking action to prevent those from becoming worse issues than they could be. So this article from ICF Monitor talks about, in the podcast, references some of those key topics. And when they talk about where these other domestic college aid populations are declining, it's Japan, it's South Korea, it's Germany, it's Italy, it's Spain. And these are countries that have seen these issues coming and have begun to adjust their policies to become more international student friendly, to make the process of coming easier, to make it a more attractive destination, to reduce costs, to allow for extended benefits after they're done, for work permission. All that's already happening in those countries. We've talked about that regularly with regard to what Korea is doing, what Japan's doing, what Taiwan is doing. They've implemented specific scholarships on the front end for international students to come that also have some work requirements on the back end, but then making that pathway to work and extended work and into residency much clearer for them, because they have needs in their economy. These international students are being admitted to programs that they know are going to be high need for their countries in the coming 2 to 4 or 5 years. So other countries are responding well to the need to do this. We, on the other hand, in the United States, we've never had an international ed policy. It's fundamentally antithetical to what we do in federal government in the United States because we are such a decentralized country. Even at the federal level, when you look at how our government is set up, the amount of the number of branches of government, not branches, but departments within the federal government that impact or have international education, touch on it in some way, shape, or form, are ones that are at cross purposes. They do not align with anything really, other than, yes, having international, or in the past, but maybe before this administration, they did not align in terms of providing a unified front for the country as a whole, in terms of policies that allowed for what these other countries are doing now, allowed for an easier entry into the country, into the ability to work after they're done with their studies, and all of these things. We make it far too difficult. We have skill shortages across the country in major skill areas, and we don't have our domestic age populations to fill them. So in the reality is we need these, we will continue to need these skilled workers from overseas because we're not producing enough of them here from our own population. So that has certainly impacted other countries to the point where they've recognized, our leadership have recognized, but in the U.S. we can't do that. Department of Education barely touches international, and only through funding for students to go abroad. I don't really have anything specific for students coming here. You have the Department of State, which has traditionally flown the banner for Education USA in terms of being that voice for international education for those looking to come and study here. The State Department's real take on international ed is we want foreign students today become world leaders tomorrow, that they come here and go home. It's a public diplomacy tool that these students from overseas come, have positive experiences on our campuses, get to know American culture and American people, and leave with favorable impressions of us. And when they're back home in their countries, they become leaders, and it may be influencing policy, maybe government leaders, maybe politicians, prime ministers, presidents someday. That can impact positively. That's the State Department's perspective on it. Department of Ed, only for outbound students, our students going overseas. For Department of Homeland Security, we know what they do now. They are all about security and all about minor infractions becoming an expendable, a terminatable offense. From parking tickets on up. We now see DHS's perspective has always been security, securing our borders, and making it as difficult as frankly possible for individuals to come into this country, especially with this current administration. We also don't know what, we have a two-stage process for entry. It's State Department issues visas, Department of Homeland Security actually lets people in or not to the country based on how those CBP officers feel on a given day and how their feelings when they interview someone as they're entering the country off a plane where they've traveled for hours and hours. So that their purpose in Homeland Security is very different from State Department, is very different from the Department of Education. Then you have the Department of Commerce, which you would think in this administration would be the department that would maybe perhaps best drive international education initiatives, because education, international education, is our sixth largest export industry in this country. And I know it's hard to think of that as what we do as an export industry, but we're bringing students in, we're bringing revenue in from overseas. We're exporting our education to the world, and in so doing, we're bringing revenue to our colleges, to our communities, to our states, to our nation as a result of these students coming from abroad. The $45 billion a year economic impact these students have with tuition revenue, housing, the jobs that are created as a result of these international students being here. For every 3 international students, there's 1 job assigned to that in the United States, whether it's a campus job, whether it's someone in the community that provides housing for graduate students, whether it's stores that have to have additional inventory to meet needs of overseas families. All of these things impact the economy. That's why it's the 6th largest industry, and that's what Commerce puts the weight of their interest in, is developing U.S. business interests, and universities are businesses in the Department of Commerce's eyes. So it's a financial driver from the Department of Commerce. Then Department of Labor is part of the equation too, much less certainly at the back end in terms of their policies for H-1Bs and Ls and all of these other worker visas that students can eventually matriculate into. Part of that problem is we don't align our our federal departments on international education policy at all. There's been kind of lip service paid through these agreements to have conversations that started back in 21, I think, at the EdUSA Forum, where you got the representatives from those major departments together and put out a joint statement on importance of international education. And they agreed to meet regularly and consult and all of these things, but they really didn't do anything together. So we're in a situation now where we have to do something. And what is the administration going to do? Because they're clearly not going to be they're not taking the approach that they need to be. Performing the kinds of things that Taiwan, Japan, Korea are doing now. Germany is doing in response to domestic cliffs. They could care less, frankly, in this administration. So unless voices of reason prevail in the White House and senior leadership, it doesn't seem likely it's happening soon. So the next question is, how do we respond to this administration's actions? We've celebrated last week the reversal of the terminations in SEVIS, and we got also a little bit of a sense on how it was being done, how these terminations actually happened. Now we're getting the news that there's a new policy that is being floated within Department of Homeland Security. Immigration officials have a new policy that would look at different mechanisms that would actually codify the ability of DHS to terminate records and the inherent authority that is in this new as needed. They have the inherent authority to terminate these records as needed. And it doesn't say what those specifics are, but just says that the vague evidence of failure to comply with non-immigrant visa terms and a visa revocation can happen as well. They tie those two together, which can be issued by the State Department without evidence of a violation. So expanding the powers of State Department to terminate visas without review, that would also importantly not be subject to court challenge. That immigration attorneys have said that this is going to be, and it's an Inside Higher Ed article that I posted the link to, that if it's implemented, the new policy would enshrine broad permissions for ICE to begin deporting students practically at will. Now, these are immigration attorneys that will obviously challenge these in court, and the key is how these terms are defined. And normally, SEVIS terminations only occur when institutions indicate a student has been less than full-time without academic reason or health reasons, that they haven't updated their address, they haven't updated their major with us and gotten new documents. Usually it's the institution that is doing that. Clearly, with this tranche of up to 4,500 is the number that has been thrown around by those that have been reporting it. I think the Chronicle is leaning more towards that 4,500 number in terms of number of students that have had their status terminated. We're now at the point where we have that 4,500. This is 4,500 that had at some point had a violation of anything from a parking ticket to a speeding ticket to a lane violation, usually motor vehicle related, to maybe they got into a fight at their previous institution and they transferred institutions. Maybe that was resolved, but the way it was determined is you had the 1.3 million students that were in SEVIS. You have criminal databases or federal, state, and local databases that were cross-referenced for any infractions, and they came up with, out of 1.3 million, came up with 4,500, maybe 4,500 students in that mix. So that is 3 3/10 of 1%. 0.3% of all international students had even something minor happen. So a very, very, very small microcosm, and none of those, as far as we can tell, maybe there are 4 or 5 that had something violent like a DUI or vehicular homicide or something like that, that would be clear felony violations that should result in deportation, revoking student status. It usually never got to that point because the students left the country and didn't want to have to and face charges or whatever it might have been, or the governments removed them if they were on scholarship. So this new policy, if it's not official yet, and if it gets implemented, it's going to be a big deal. There's going to be another round of lawsuits, all of these things to challenge the policy, because the key phrase, and again in the Inside Higher Ed article makes it clear that evidence of failure to comply with non-immigrant visa terms. Now, what those non-immigrant visa terms are, as we know as institutions, are students have to maintain full-time status unless it's their final semester or unless they have medical reasons for less than full-time course load. They have to update their address within a certain number of days of a change. They have to update their major in a similar time frame. All of these things are reporting requirements that are tied to their non-immigrant status. There isn't huge documentation on violations of what level of if misdemeanors are okay, felonies are bad, and can lead to termination. Normally, it's a student does something to if there is an international student and a student does something that violates the university code of conduct, and then they're expelled from the university. That's typically they don't have any student status anymore, so then their CVIS record would be terminated. But there has not yet been. It's certainly not codified anywhere in the law as to currently that what qualifies as failure to comply with their terms, or what is a violation of status in terms of a legal violation versus something that is just a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. It's a moving violation, basically. That's not a deportable offense, one would think. Common sense would say that was not something that is deportable. So these are the kind of questions we need answers to, and we don't have those yet. The policy isn't written with the level of specificity that would make us feel even slightly comfortable. So what we're going to do and how we respond to the administration's actions, there's 3 articles that I'll share that do provide, I think, the kinds of arguments that we need to be making to our leadership in the United States government, to our government affairs officials, to state and local leaders, on the importance of international students to what we do, to our economies, to our cities, to our communities, to obviously our institutions. First of those is from David DeMaria, a good friend and colleague at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. His is titled, "Deporting International Students Risks Making the U.S. a Less Attractive Destination, Putting Its Economic Engine at Risk." And money talks with this administration, and David's article certainly makes a very strong case for how when we take the actions we've taken as a government to basically unilaterally terminate status of students, striking fear into those students, and this is one of the blogs I talked about last week from Rajika Bandari, a good friend as well, who talked about this is what we have to counter. We have to counter students' fears. And currently the government is creating a culture of fear, even among students that have done nothing wrong. And 99.7% of all international students, and vast majority of that other 0.3%, have done nothing wrong. Let's be clear about that. Yet this administration's approach towards solving a minuscule problem that might only be 10, 15 students that are truly in the country that shouldn't be and are not doing what they should be to maintain status. Though that number is minuscule, yet the brush is being spread across all our international students by this government. And that has implications. And as David points out, and two others that have also voiced their concerns that are referenced in The Hill, obviously a government publication, or not a government publication, but a publication that goes out on Capitol Hill that talks about the trade implications, negative economic implications of these international students in the United States, and why we have to be doing something to not lose them, and to keep them on side. And this is, there's been damage done, just like the travel bans in the first administration that caused fear among students in the Muslim world, even though their countries weren't on that list. Of that seven countries that were banned, five of them were Muslim majority countries. The other two were not, North Korea and Vietnam. So we see a climate of fear created when the government does these actions that seem quite extreme. And we're still waiting, and it's almost too late. And anything that happens now is kind of really putting students behind the eight ball that might be thinking about travel. Current students that might be thinking about travel now, is that they may not be able to get back into the country. And so these articles that I'm sharing with you from The Hill and from Dana Dolan in Yahoo News have talked about, again, the economic implications. If this government continues down this path, if it continues to put law-abiding international students, the 99.97% of all of them that are here, that by taking actions that round up a minuscule amount, they're brushing all of these international students into the same pool as they do some of these Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members that are deporting to Venezuela or deporting to prisons in El Salvador. Those problems are much larger than these international students that are some of the biggest contributors to our economy in this country. We miss that. The government obviously misses that point, that we are shooting ourselves in the foot economically by taking the actions we're taking. So one of the things, we'll finish up with this last point on why we should be embracing TNE now. And for those who aren't familiar with what TNE is, that is transnational education. And it's something that basically means you're, as an institution, you're delivering your academic program content in other countries in a variety of different formats, either through online, all online courses taught somewhere around the world, anywhere from the comfort of students' homes, to a bricks and mortar building that you build yourself and have your own campus facilities. We see about half to a dozen universities that are really doing that well in the United States out of the 4,500 that we have. So very few are actually doing that bricks and mortar piece well. And then there's a kind of a middle ground, a hybrid version, sometimes called a campus and campus environment, that looks at ways to have other university or another institution's facilities, leasing those to deliver your programs in country on another university's campus. So a campus and campus for some of your top programs. And there's a growing list of institutions in the US that are doing that now. We've just seen today, and there'll be a story in the newsletter next week about it, IIT has become the first, that's Illinois Institute of Technology, has become the first US institution to get a campus approved for India. A physical campus approved for India. We've seen, and the article I'm posting now talks about University of New Haven has also been the first U.S. institution to get a branch campus opened in Saudi Arabia. So there are U.S. institutions, and increasingly we're seeing these develop. In India, it's a really hard sell. There's a lot of bureaucracy there, and there really has to be close ties and someone on the ground to really facilitate those agreements, because there's a lot of bureaucracy in India, and it makes it very difficult to do your own facility, campus overseas of your institution. But why is TNE important? Well, if the recent discussions we've just been talking about this hour have given you any clue, is that the environment right now for international education in the United States is not great. It is under threat, as is higher ed in general, by this administration. It's being called into question. Everything is being challenged. And the climate abroad and the view of the United States abroad for whether we're still a welcoming destination as a country for international students is being damaged. We're not the shining city on the hill anymore for international students because of the way this administration is acting. So that will have consequences, and the enrollments this fall will certainly reflect that. We'll probably see the first non-9/11, non-COVID related decreases in new international students coming in this fall when we see the SEVIS by the numbers reports in probably September, October. No doubt that's going to happen. So TNE is the way to still deliver your education abroad to students in countries that maybe don't have any issues in terms of allowing students to come in. We've talked often about how many other countries are trying to become destinations for international students, to become regional hubs in Southeast Asia, in the Gulf, in other countries, to become regional hubs to attract some more students from their local diaspora or local regions. So that's happening already organically and has been since COVID. Well, we've seen the real desire, particularly on the part of Chinese students, to study more locally. They've gone to Hong Kong, they've gone to Malaysia, they've gone to Thailand, they're going to Indonesia. They're going regionally instead of across the globe now in increasingly large numbers. So as institutions here, if we're partnering with universities in countries that want to enroll students from abroad and become an increasingly attractive destination in their areas, if they are partnering with U.S. institutions to offer degree programs that they want, English taught degrees are the fastest growing industry in higher ed these days outside the United States and English speaking world, that if we're able to offer our programs on their campuses to students, that's a marketing gold for an institution that's trying to become a regional hub for international students, because they'll be on their campus. They might take might have students that do their courses elsewhere, but it'll increase the traffic of international students to their campuses. So that's why we should be embracing TNE, because it's going to be a lot harder to get students in the front door now while this administration is still in power. So we need to be doing everything we can to explore options down the road. That might be a year or two off before you're able to realize any enrolled students that you're going to get revenue from to offset the students that won't be able to get in the front door. So that is something you need to be exploring now. The Brits have been doing it for years, decades. They have, for the last 3 or 4 years, have conferred more British university degrees outside of England, outside the United Kingdom, than they have inside the United Kingdom to universities and students that go there. So it is already being done successfully. There are cost-benefit analysis that will say it might be not as lucrative as you might think, but it's still a way to enroll students in your programs and have a revenue stream coming. Could be 200-300 students at a time if you have multiple locations around the world that you could be delivering these programs. And that adds up quickly if you multiply that across various institutions. So that's all we have for you this week on the Midweek Roundup. Thank you for being a part of the conversation today. Wish you all the very best, and keep in touch with us on the newsletter. Subscribe if you're not already through LinkedIn or our website. Until next week.